6. Abortion. Abortion, the destruction of the human embryo or fetus, has long been regarded by biblical standards as murder. The grounds for this judgment are the Sixth Commandment and Exodus 21:22-25. Cassuto's quote-unquote explanatory rendering of this latter passage brings out its meaning. Quote, "When men strive together and they hurt unintentionally a woman with child, and her children come forth, but no mischief happens, that is, the woman and the children do not die, the one who hurt her shall surely be punished by a fine. But if any mischief happens, that is, if the woman dies or the children die, then you shall give life for life." End quote. The comment of Kyle and DeLeach is important. Quote, "If men strove and thrust against a woman with child who had come near or between them for the purpose of making peace, so that her children come into the world, and no injury was done either to the woman or the child that was born, a pecuniary compensation was to be paid, such as the husband of the woman laid upon him, and he was to give it by an appeal to arbitrators. A fine is imposed because even if no injury had been done to the woman and the fruit of her womb, such a blow might have endangered life. The plural is employed for the purpose of speaking indefinitely, because there might possibly be more than one child in the womb. But if injury occur to the mother or the child, thou shalt give soul for soul, eye for eye, wound for wound. Thus, perfect retribution was to be made." End quote. It is interesting to note that antinomian dispensationalism sees no law here or elsewhere. Waltke of Dallas Theological Seminary sees no law against abortion here, and in fact feels that, quote, "abortion was permissible in Old Testament law." End quote. The importance of Exodus 21:22-25 becomes all the more clear as we realize that this is case law, that is, that it sets forth by a minimal case certain larger implications. Let us examine some of the implications of this passage. First, very obviously, the text cites not a case of deliberate abortion, but a case of accidental abortion. If the penalty for even an accidental case is so severe, it is obvious that a deliberately induced abortion is very strongly forbidden. It is not necessary to ban deliberate abortion, since it is already eliminated by this law. Second, the penalty for even an accidental abortion is death. If a man who, in the course of a fight, unintentionally bumps a pregnant woman and causes her to abort must suffer the death penalty, how much more so any person who intentionally induces an abortion? Third, even if no injury results to either the mother or the fetus, the man in the case is liable to a fine, and, in fact, must be fined. Clearly, the law strongly protects the pregnant woman and her fetus, so that every pregnant mother has a strong hedge of law around her. Fourth, since even a mother bird with eggs or young is covered by law, Deuteronomy 22:6-7, clearly any tampering with the fact of birth is a serious matter. To destroy life is forbidden except where required or permitted by God's law. Christianity very early was confronted with the fact of abortion, in that the Greco-Roman world regarded the matter as valid if the state deemed it advisable. Plato's Republic is very plain-spoken on this matter. Quote, "I should make it a rule for a woman to bear children to the state from her 20th year to her 40th year, and a man, after getting over the sharpest burst in the race of life, thenceforward to beget children to the state until he is 55 years old. If then a man who is either above or under this age shall meddle with the business of begetting children for the commonwealth, we shall declare his act to be an offense against religion and justice, inasmuch as he is raising up a child for the state, who, should detection be avoided, instead of having been begotten under the sanction of those sacrifices and prayers, which are to be offered up at every marriage ceremonial by priests and priestesses, and the whole city, to the effect that the children to be born may ever be more virtuous and more useful than their virtuous and useful parents, will have been conceived under cover of darkness by the aid of dire incontinence. The same law will hold should a man who is still of an age to be a father meddle with a woman who is also of the proper age without the introduction of the magistrate, for we shall accuse him of raising up to the state an illegitimate, unsponsored, and unhallowed child. But as soon as the women and the men are past the prescribed age, we shall allow the latter, I imagine, to associate freely with whomsoever they please, so that it be not a daughter or mother or daughter's child or grandmother, and in like manner we shall permit the women to associate with any man, except a son or a father, or one of their relations in the direct line ascending or descending, but only after giving them strict orders to do their best, if possible, to prevent any child, haply so conceived, from seeing the light. But if that cannot sometimes be helped, to dispose of the infant on the understanding that the fruit of such a union is not to be reared. That, too, is a reasonable plan. But how are they to distinguish fathers and daughters and the relations you described just now? Not at all, I replied. Only all the children that are born between the 7th and 10th month from the day on which one of their number was married are to be called by him, if male, his sons, if female, his daughters. And they shall call him father, and their children he shall call his grandchildren. These again shall call him and his fellow bridegrooms and brides, grandfathers and grandmothers. Likewise, all shall regard as brothers and sisters those that were born in the same period during which their own fathers and mothers were bringing them into the world. And as we said just now, all these shall refrain from touching one another. But the law will allow intercourse between brothers and sisters, if the lot chances to fall that way, and if the Delphian priestess also gives it her sanction." End quote. In this perspective, the state is the ultimate order and the working god of the system, so that the state can order abortion, infanticide, and incest. Aristotle's position was similar, in that he required abortion where state-allowed births were exceeded. In Rome, when abortion was made illegal for women, it was done not on the grounds of ultimate moral law, but that it defrauded the husband of legitimate offspring. Very early, the Church condemned abortion. Didache 2. The Apostolic Constitutions, Canon, paragraph 3, stated, "Thou shalt not slay the child by causing abortion, nor kill that which is begotten, for everything that is shaped and has received a soul from God, if it be slain, shall be avenged as being unjustly destroyed." Exodus 21:23. End quote. Tertullian, Apologeticus, chapter 9, stated the Christian stand clearly. Quote, "To hinder a birth is merely a speedier man-killing. Nor does it matter whether you take away a life that is born or destroy one that is coming to birth. That is a man which is going to be one. You have the fruit already in its seed." End quote. The modern attitude toward abortion has been increasingly permissive. Thus, A.E. Crawley saw its main reason to be poverty, stating indeed that, quote, "as often as not, the sole reason is poverty." End quote. Havelock Ellis saw civilization as leading to a decrease in abortion as life became more rational and scientific. In other words, abortion is not a sin, but a primitive remedy for economic distress and for reckless sexual behavior. However, abortions have not decreased. The decline of the authority of biblical law has led to an increase in abortions. In 1946, the Inej Burns abortion case in San Francisco led to the realization that whereas the annual births were 16,000, the annual abortions in that city numbered 18,000. In 1958, estimates of U.S. abortions ranged from 200,000 to 1,200,000. Evidence indicates that the majority of abortions are procured by married women. An extensive program of the 1960s asserted women's quote-unquote right to abortion, a position taken by the U.S. Public Health Association. In the Soviet Union, abortions are free and legal. The legalization in California of therapeutic abortions with a broad definition which permitted abortion if the mother's mental or physical health might be impaired did not stop illegal abortions. The answer of the author of the measure was a pledge to expand the law even further. Under the impact of humanism, the legal situation became badly clouded. In Boston, an unborn baby aborted by an accident recovered damages for wrongful injury against the owners of a truck, which struck an automobile occupied by Mrs. Zavin Torigian so that her child was born prematurely. This ruling was in line with biblical law. But in New York, Mrs. Robert Stewart, who gave birth to a retarded child after contracting measles and being denied an abortion, won a suit against the hospital for denying her an abortion. An important study of abortion in quote-unquote primitive societies revealed that its main functions are a revenge against the father, a hatred of responsibility. The Papuans of Gilvink Bay declare, quote, "Children are a burden, and we get tired of them. They destroy us," end quote. A desire to avoid shame, an analog to suicide, a hatred of life, a hatred of men, and a castration of the father. As a flight from parenthood, the motivation of abortion is 1. The preservation of beauty, 2. The continued enjoyment of freedom and irresponsibility, and 3. The avoidance of the sexual abstinence common to many cultures during pregnancy and lactation. The essence of these motives is, according to Devereaux, quote, "a neurotic flight from maturity," end quote. That even these quote-unquote primitive societies are aware that abortion is murder appears in Devereaux's section, quote, "the eschatology of the fetus," end quote. A telling argument against abortion appeared in the American Bar Association Journal written by Dr. A.C. Maitis, professor of obstetrics and gynecology at UCLA, and his brother Norbert J. Maitis, chairman of the Division of Business Administration at Sacramento State College. According to them, quote, "they said those who deplore the loss of 5,000 to 10,000 mothers annually in illegal abortions ignore the 1 million or more unborn children, quote, sacrificed in the process of this massive assault on human life," end quote. The Maitis brothers said some persons would justify abortion in the case of unborn infants that would be born crippled or defective. Quote, "Would any reputable doctor propose to try living cripples or mental or physical defectives in comparable ex parte proceedings? Start by eliminating senile parents, then the millions of blind persons? Move on to all who are bedridden, then those confined to wheelchairs, and finally those who use crutches? Proceed gradually with the disposition of the millions who wear spectacles, use hearing aids, are equipped with false teeth, are too stout or too thin. Where draw the line between acceptable and the unacceptable level of fitness?" the Maitis brothers asked. No human being is perfect. Would the world, moreover, really be a better place after the destruction of the millions of defective individuals? Has the world gained or lost from the services of the epileptic Michelangelo, of the deaf Edison, of the hunchbacked Steinmetz, of the Roosevelts, both the asthmatic Theodore and the polio-paralyzed Franklin? It must be recognized that liberalized abortion laws would logically be followed by pressures for legalized euthanasia. The attack on life is essentially the same, they said, end quote. The essence of the demand for abortion is to return to pagan statism, to place life again under the state, rather than under God. The implications of abortion concern more than the fetus. They involve every living man. The demand for abortion is antinomian to the core. Significantly, when a group of young women invaded a New York State legislative hearing to break it up with their demand for total repeal of the anti-abortion law, they declared that, quote, they were tired of listening to men debate something that was of primary concern to women. "What right do you men have to tell us whether we can or cannot have a child?" shouted one of the women, end quote. The logic of this position is revealing. The women held that men cannot legislate with respect to childbirth because they do not experience it. The test of legislative validity in both the law and the lawmakers is thus experience. By this logic, it can be held that good citizens cannot legislate with respect to murder, since the act of murder is outside their experience. Humanism and experiential religious philosophies reduces all things to the test of man's experience, and thus undercut all law and order. Men who cannot, like women, bear children can legislate with respect to abortion, because the principle of law is not experience, but the law word of God. One final note. A common rhetorical test case asks whether a doctor should attempt to save the life of the mother or of the child in a critical case. Whose life should be sacrificed, the fetus or the mother? The question is an artificial one, according to competent doctors. A doctor works in a crisis to save life and does all that he can for mother and child. No doctor questioned has had such a quote-unquote choice. Only the responsibility always to do all, moment by moment, to save the life of mother and child. Morality is not furthered by posing artificial questions whose purpose is to place a person in the place of God. In California, the liberalized abortion law led rapidly to a very serious crisis, one which most people chose to ignore. Governor Reagan observed on April 22, 1970, that the law was creating an ugly situation. Quote, Reagan said it took a lot of soul-searching for him to sign Bielensen's 1967 liberalization bill. Under that act, abortions are allowed when the prospective mother's physical or mental health is in danger, or when the pregnancy was caused by rape or incest. Previously, abortions were permitted only when the woman's life was endangered. Quote, Let me tell you what's happened even with the liberalization that we have, Reagan told the women. Pointing to the mental health section, the governor said, Our public health department has told us its projections that if the present rate of increase continues in California, a year from now there will be more abortions than there will be live births in this state, and a great proportion of them will be financed by Medi-Cal. He said, under a technicality, a young unmarried girl can become pregnant, go on welfare, and she is automatically eligible for the abortion if she wants it under Medi-Cal. And all she has to do is get a psychiatrist, and they're finding that easy to do, who will walk by the bed and say she has suicidal tendencies, end quote. Reagan said that in Sacramento, quote, a 15-year-old girl has just had her third abortion, with the same psychiatrist each time saying she has suicidal tendencies. I don't think the state should be in that business, end quote. As the governor spoke, Senator Anthony C. Bielensen had submitted a bill to remove all restrictions on abortion except a requirement that a physician must perform it. The Democratic gubernatorial candidate Jesse Unruh supported Bielensen's proposal.